Christopher, how you doing? Welcome to our group here.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Go on.
It's good to have you.
Yeah, we'll just give you a little. I don't know if you've seen the show at all. We all kind of got together, met at the Electric Universe conference in August last year, and this has kind of grown organically. So we're super excited to have you on. Very, obviously big fans. So thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored.
Welcome to the August 7th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have David, Jim, Edwin, Heather, Buddy, and Robert, with our very special guest, Chris Dunn. We will be discussing new discoveries since the Giza Power Plant, our mutual fascination of the electric universe, and what that means for future ancient technology exploration. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Well, you all know who I am, and I see several of you have joined. Perhaps you could introduce yourselves.
Sure.
You want to go, Neil? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Neil Thompson, electrical engineer from Canada, and I've been involved in. I've seen your work for longer than I've been or known about the electric universe work. So it's, but it certainly lends itself together. So you're an inspiration. So thank you very much.
Oh. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm David Johnson. I'm kind of the co-pilot flight engineer a little bit, but I'm an electrical engineer as well, and but focus mostly on software, and done medical device work as well. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. My name is Ido Kaal. I've been involved with the electric universe for a few years now. I've been doing my own research on a structured atom model, and through the platform of the electric universe in the cold fusion community, I hope to bring new physics to the world. And I'm a strong proponent of the electric view, if you will, meaning we think that the electric component is the driving component or the main driving component of this universe. Love your work, seen it for many years now, totally fascinated, and really like this chance to fire a few questions at you and talk a little bit further there.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Heather.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Heather Stargazer. I'm part of the group, and I'm an author. I wrote a book as an introduction to the electric universe theory, and we're just all really, really excited to have you here today, so thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Oh, here comes Richard and Robert. Just take right on.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Richard, how you doing?
Hi, Dave.
Yeah, Richard is over in it's Wexford, Ireland. So.
Yeah.
We're just doing introductions. So
Okay, go ahead.
Christopher Dunn has joined us, and we're very honored, of course.
Good.
Well, my name is Robert Hawthorne. I'm from Salt Lake City. I've been involved with the Electric Universe for about a year now because of a work that I've been involved with for 20 years involving ejecta from upheaval dome that we thought was a meteorite. Couldn't prove it was such because of its features. Kind of laid low for about, like I said, the 20 years. And then we've just, with a new theory that we've been involved with the Electric Universe, we believe that it was an electrical event similar to what caused the Grand Canyon and Valles Marineris. And we've been involved with them, and things are going well with that. Great to have you on.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, Richard, you just showed up. Jim's here too. He hides. Jim hides.
He does.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. I've got a mainstream background in physics and did graduate work in astronomy, and I became aware of Christopher Dunn's work at CPAC conference. That was my first outside the box experiences. All this CPAC material.
Oh, what year was that?
I was up till I think 2011. I know you presented 2012, but I was already on to the. I stopped going to the conferences. I still kept following them, but I didn't go to conferences after that.
I hope I didn't have anything to do with that.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I missed that. It was just in the beginning, those conferences were really focused on more of the astronomical part, and that's what I was interested in at the time. And
I understand. Yeah. Well, it's great to meet you all, and you know me, and now I know you are. Well, anyway. So I feel like I'm a little out of my depth because if you followed my work, you know I'm not an electrical engineer. Though I did read a book about it once. And I introduced some of the concepts in a book with a little advice and consultation. So if you have any questions that you have, that's fine. I think at the outset, I would like to, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me into this chat. I would like this actually to be the first of several chats because I have become, I am very interested in the electric universe. I know they had a conference in Bath in England this year, and I was hoping that I would be able to attend that, but unfortunately that didn't work out.
You should have told me. I mean, I was there too.
Yes, but I don't go begging for money. It is kind of like
well.
Yeah, Adrian Gilbert actually contacted me, and I think it was Maria Wheatley. I communicated with her, and but I didn't get any. There was no indication in our communication that I was being invited as a presenter. It was more inviting me to be a guest, which I have no problem with, except that the time was wrong for me, the finances were wrong for me. But still, I believe in in what you're pursuing, and I have colleagues who are also extremely interested in what you're pursuing, and I'm sure that they would want to get involved too. So,
the more the merrier.
Right. Yeah, let's keep an open communication channel here, and let this be the first of several fruitful chats. And next year in May in Denver in the United States, I believe, should be the next EU conference. I'm sure that I'm going to throw up a little ball there to get you on the list there, because I would like to see you there. I think it's extremely important work. There you go.
I would be deeply honored to be a presenter and share what I have. Most certainly, and I look forward to that.
Your Giza Power Plant theory, with the evidence that you collected, was well, for people who follow the EU, your evidence is still evidence. Data is, that's the thing about the electric universe that I kind of like. The data is always accepted. The theory is still open to interpretation, though.
Exactly, and essentially that was my approach throughout my research and actually setting down the hypothesis or theory for publication was that the evidence, I think, is unimpeachable, but the theory obviously has to be tested. And there's movement in that area too, and I think your group could be a large part of that too. But really, it wasn't a matter of me being blessed with the knowledge that formed the conclusion in my book. It was actually more of a detective's story where I focused on the evidence because I saw that there was lacking in the literature a comprehensive theory that explained every feature within the Great Pyramid. And so I was fascinated by the Great Pyramid, and I felt that there needed to, there had to be an answer for all the features that you find within the Great Pyramid, not just one or two. It had to explain just about every little bit of evidence that was available at the time, and then further evidence that came later would either support the theory or it would call it into question.
Certainly, yes. We well, some of the things that you, one of the problems with going and researching something like this is that, which you so aptly point out in the in talking about the air shafts, is that we don't know when they were damaged. They were opened up by chisels. They found things. There were parts lying around that are cleaned up now. As you said, right. The salt washed off the walls, so to speak. So a lot of the evidence, especially at least in those upper chambers, we can attribute from 860, I think it was, when they built that, when they finally got up to the upper chamber, and whatever they found or whatever they did, they, those resonating coils that you were talking about, and along the Grand Gallery and so forth, especially combined with things like quartz, which is piezoelectric, and that type of thing, really lends credence that this was some sort of device. It was built to specifications. It's made to do something. One of the things about the EU is that there's a tendency to accept that just like today, the St. Elmo's fire does not occur as much in thunderstorms and the masts of ships anymore. But in the past it did, and if we keep going in the past more and more, it was more and more prevalent, which might indicate that the environment of the Earth was quite simply more electrified back then, and what that could mean for piezoelectricity or harmonies when you're trying to make something vibrate. What was the purpose? Were you just creating lights, or were you trying to do something even more interesting, like work, like machining, and so forth?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. I don't know if you probably have become aware of a recent study where they have determined that the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, had the ability to focus electromagnetic energy, or at least it impacted it in a certain way.
I did see an article about that just recently. They were showing that it seems to somehow be somewhat like a lens, not unlike the things that you would say that the pyramid people, the pyramid power people of the 1970s, might say. It seems that way, but yet it does seem that it also is true, at least in some fashion. They of course say that they weren't building for this, but.
Well, another interesting thing is that they say that it resonates with specific frequencies of 200 to 600 meters wavelength. And it so happens, because I did some research on the web after reading that is the dominant frequency that the sun radiates radio waves on during a solar storm.
Oh.
So it's like the most energy you're going to get from the sun in terms of radio waves is during a solar storm, and the pyramid seems to be tuned to that wavelength, which would be evidence that it is going to generate an electrical field from time to time. So, could you, Don, could you give a summary of your basic theory? Because I found I was directed to a website of yours and I saw lots of information there, but I didn't have time to really focus in on what is the key thesis, and the evidence for it. if that would not be a waste of time for everybody.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, the basic thesis is, and actually, if you go back to the conversation about electromagnetic energy being affected within the pyramid, and you refer to the basic theory that I put forward, I would say that while the electric characteristics of the atmosphere and how the pyramid interacts with those electromagnetic waves, from my perspective, I would agree with those who would say that by itself is not the reason why the pyramid was built.
Okay.
Because I believe that I don't think you're going to get much work or usable energy out of the just the ambient electromagnetic waves that are circling the planet.
That's interesting. That's an interesting point because I was always informed of a study that was done by a student, I believe, in the 70s, where he used a pyramid over a plant.
That's what I was just talking about.
Yeah, and the plant under the pyramid maintained growth, actually stimulated growth, while the other plant that was underneath the pyramid just died. So you actually won like the silver medal in a science competition or something like that.
Yeah, that kind of work. Yeah, that was who was it? Patrick Flanagan did that. There was some research by, I think, a Polish engineer, Dwal. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's Drbal, I think. But that whole concept of pyramid energy and its effect on biological matter has been around since the 70s. But as far as the Great Pyramid itself, when you look at the resources and the immensity of that structure, my contention is that it was made to create usable power, but it was tapping in. I mean, it had to draw a lot more energy to drive electromagnetics or to actually create more. And that power, that force, was coming from the Earth.
I would generally agree, or at least in our view, the difference in potential between the Earth and the ionosphere or whatever. But yeah, telluric currents moving as the charge up the planet, and as we've seen in some other chambers, I believe it's the Red Pyramid, that they see, even though there's a well at the bottom of it, there's extreme weathering around the well. I think John Anthony West pointed that out. And right. So you're seeing that this site itself is the holy area where you built or whatever, because of its properties. So it seems.
Correct. And further to that, you may get electromagnetic waves passing through the granite, though the article that was written about that didn't mention the thousands of tons of granite. The granite would affect the electromagnetic waves in a way, depending on their geometry, obviously. But I don't think those ambient waves would affect the granite. And so those granite beams were placed in order to vibrate harmonically in sympathy with each other. And it would take a much more physical force to move the granite than electrical force.
That does make sense. Yes. I find that wonder, like, the amount of what is it? We don't know the properties of all the stones, and we don't know the environment in which the stones were in. Although it is clear just from looking at your work and the nature of trying to make sure that there is no pressure on that resonating cavity in the King's Chamber, and of course the Grand Gallery, in which if it was indeed, as you pointed out, there's burn marks or other there was something being done in that area as well. It just wasn't used to move something to put those blocks in place and then leave it.
Oh, right, absolutely.
Well, is part of your thesis to do with creating hydrogen by hydrolysis?
The creation of hydrogen, I proposed, happened in the Queen's Chamber, and that was done through a chemical reaction, according to the theory that I presented. I'm open to any other theory if it would explain the evidence. But.
Well, before we go to other theories, I would like to ask you what your thesis is then. What was done with the hydrogen in the King's Chamber, if you will? What happened there?
Yes, that created a medium within the King's Chamber that was excited to a higher energy state. Okay, so you have a gas that's driven to a high energy state through the interaction of vibration coming through the pyramidon, the vibration being converted to airborne sound. You have some of the physical vibrations coming through the rock that affect the granite, and then the Grand Gallery makes up the balance that is needed to drive that hydrogen to a high energy state. And then with a input signal coming through the northern shaft, and that's where one of the key pieces of evidence is contained. That's the northern shaft, which has the dimensions that will be appropriate for a wavelength of hydrogen microwave.
And what would be the purpose of creating that particular wavelength?
Actually, I think when you look at the connection of the pyramid with the Earth, and then not just the Earth but the universe, and you have that natural signal that is bombarding the Earth at all times. The 21 centimeter wavelength from atomic hydrogen in the universe is hitting the planet at all times. So it's a natural element, simplest element, and if you can take that, excite it, and create like a mason, cause a population inversion with the input of a lot of energy. And you can take a low signal coming into the chamber and create a power output from the southern shaft.
Okay.
So you have an in and an out, if you will.
Yeah, the northern shaft would be your signal input, and then you would have interaction within the chamber between the gas and the granite, and then power output from the southern shaft. And another piece of evidence, those shafts are really key pieces of evidence. The southern shaft has an opening that is shaped like a captures it, like a horn antenna, microwave horn antenna. So
okay,
and those are the things that I kind of focused on, and which led me to conclude that perhaps the gas, because I'd already been researching what kind of gas and was looking at other kinds of gases that could explain the salts and the substances that are found in the Queen's Chamber, plus the other evidence in the Queen's Chamber. And so looking at those key pieces of evidence, it seemed like high hydrogen was the natural, the most qualified again.
Is there any other evidence in any other pyramids that suggested that they might be building something like this in any of the other pyramids, or is this pyramid the only pyramid that they could have been doing something like this in?
Well, if you go into the Great Pyramid, most people who go into the Great Pyramid, one of the characteristics of their experience is the acoustics. That they seem to tie into the acoustical design of the pyramid. And when you go into other pyramids, you have that same phenomenon where they do seem to have been built to maximize reverberation at particular frequencies.
Right, right.
One of my colleagues studies in the pyramid at Saqqara, the Red Pyramid, and he did some acoustic testing in there. And so he's one person that I would like to get involved with. He's an extremely knowledgeable guy, and he's worked in Egypt, and he's actually a sound engineer.
Well, that would be really nice.
But again, the question was, you create this higher state hydrogen, then how is that actually tapped to do work?
Well, that's a good question, because at the exit point of the southern shaft, that's where the evidence ends. So, whatever was contained on the outside to collect that energy or channel that energy or broadcast that energy is no longer there. So, it basically, how do you want to use the energy? That's the question. And I don't have the answers could be various.
One of the things we noticed is, or at least it seems to be the case. I leave it to others to prove or disprove on that exactly, but it seems that they obviously, very much revered or understood some sort of the harmonics or whatever, and the sound involved is paramount. We also noted that in times of if there was, for example, an increased voltage field around the Earth at the time, just to say an order of magnitude more, perhaps. One of the things that we would expect is that crystals, of course, the Earth would respond. You would feel or you would hear the Earth moving, like you would hear the piezoelectric crystals in the rocks whenever there was things like the movements in the ionosphere and so forth. That type of idea that there is with of course the quartz crystals in granite and of course the casing stones and others, perhaps maybe the excited hydrogen was simply to create points of, basically a voltage resonance between 2 points. And you have an outer sheath and an inner core that's positive because you put all the hydrogen in there. And then you have an outer which is negative. And I could envision that it was be able to resonate loudly, at least even in here above human hearing, in order to vibrate other crystals in the immediate area that would actually be able to do things. That's an idea, because I hear about these tuning forks or something that were used. It was just a long thing about tuning forks and the way that they were attached to pipes, and but unfortunately, the truth of as to if they are actually real, there's only basically 2 points of evidence, and they're both speculative. So there's no pictures.
I read a report on KeelyNet. Somebody had evidently accessed the storage room in the Cairo Museum.
I think that's what it was, exactly.
Yeah, and they reported that they saw some extremely large tuning fork type devices. But, that's just kind of hearsay.
Exactly,
right now.
Yeah.
It's hard to hang your head on that. But I want to get back to the question. I think I only partially answered it. And that was the other pyramids and the similarities between them and the Great Pyramid. And if you look at the schematic, the cross section of the Great Pyramid, there are no other pyramids that are similar in design. I don't know of any other pyramid that has this kind of arrangement, that has the small shafts leading to the different chambers. Could they actually have them? And we haven't found them yet. That's possible, I suppose. But really, I mean, as far as analyzing the pyramids of Egypt, the Great Pyramid offers the most information, because that's where historically all researchers have gone.
Well, also, it looks also like the most advanced version of the concept.
Yeah.
Whatever they were doing, the stuff after it didn't hold a candle to it, and the stuff before it was just building to it.
That's what I was going to say. It looks like it's the beta test, or it doesn't seem like there's other versions. Like they were trying to build something that mimics this, like the iPod 1 or the iPhone 1, the iPhone 2, the iPhone 3. You have Pyramid 1, 2, 3. It looks like this is just like out of the blue. Some era had this idea and they found it out, and either it worked or it didn't, and they it's like this is like the beta test here, and to me it seems like that.
Well, if I may jump in there,
Of course.
the red pyramid and the bent pyramid, Senefu or something.
Senefu, yeah.
Yeah, and it allegedly, and I'm not an Egyptologist, but it means double harmony. That's the bent pyramid. I believe they have a similar interior there with resonance chamber, queens and kings chambers, etc.
Exactly.
I don't know about the shafts, but it doesn't seem like coincidence to me or tryouts.
You start looking at
Yes, and there are other unusual features in the red pyramid. You have these unusual staining on the underside of the corbels in some of those resonance chambers. And then when you go to the upper chamber, there's an area that has been kind of dug out. Almost, I don't know whether if the chamber existed there previously or not, but there is a very strong smell of ammonia in that chamber.
Wow.
So
Right.
a lot of very interesting
Well,
going on.
different elements, different resonance comes to mind.
Quite possibly. Fundamentally, I think that they may have started by building coupled oscillators with the Earth in order to stabilize the plates, so that they could, attenuate or reduce the frequency of earthquake. So drawing energy out of the plates rather than allowing that energy to build up.
I've heard that, yes.
One of the things I was curious about is, what if it never worked? What if the pyramid never worked? And another question was, what if it was one person's design, like a Nikola Tesla, a really smart person back in the day, and they tried and tried, and it they had this concept to try to build it, and either it worked or it didn't work. But it's kind of cool to think about, maybe one person's idea maybe came up with it. Who knows?
I can address that speculation. I mean, I think there's clear evidence that it was a functioning device, and that evidence you can see in the King's Chamber and also in the Grand Gallery. And at one time, there was a massive disturbance inside the King's Chamber. It seemed to focus in the King's Chamber. The walls were pushed out over an inch. The ceiling beams were cracked along the south side. And and then you have the scorch marks in the Grand Gallery. Also, it had to, if you look at the Queen's Chamber and the southern shaft, and the proposal is that a dilute hydrochloric acid solution was going down that shaft, which resulted in erosion at the bottom of the shaft, due to the specific gravity of the hydrochloric acid. But when you look at what I call the fluid switch, which is commonly known as Gantenbrink's door, it does show that the erosion on the electrodes indicates that there have been many cycles of the solution dropping below the level of the electrodes, because there is erosion and tapering on those electrodes. So it had cycled many times. And of course, the erosion pattern is consistent with an erosive fluid that is dropping down from a higher level to a bottom level, with the bottom level being affected for a longer period of time than the upper level. So you get more erosion on the bottom than the top, and that's why you have the taper. So, and then on the...
Like an electric switch. Right,
exactly. And there's a few articles on my website about the Gantenbrink's door and the fluid switch. And they have actually, they introduced the concept that I laid out in my book, and then updated articles based on what has been discovered since. So that seems to support the idea that, this was a functioning device because of the effects of the operation of that device. And then when you go to the electrodes at the end of the northern shaft, you see that one of the electrodes is clean, and the other electrode has a coating on it. So a white coating. It's almost like, I would say it was electroplated, which is consistent with the idea that, I proposed that a hydrated zinc solution passed into the chamber to interact with the hydrochloric acid. So when you have electroplating in a bath, you don't. If the thing never worked, you wouldn't have the deposits. The amount of deposit that you see there. And so you have, when you start looking at all the little pieces of evidence that go into the idea of this being a functioning device, then everything seems to support the idea that it functioned. For how long, I have no idea. But the idea that it came to a screeching halt with an explosion in the King's Chamber, and then that explosion affecting the resonators in the Grand Gallery, you see the evidence both in the King's Chamber and the Grand Gallery. So my book needs to be updated because most of this evidence came after the Giza Power Plant was published, which was actually 20 years ago this month.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, if we look at all this evidence, for me personally, I've been aware of this quite a while. It's utterly convincing that we're dealing with a highly developed, high-tech apparatus, right?
Yeah.
Now, could you speak to? I know this is a difficult topic, but could you speak to a little bit as to why they are holding so much on to the story of it's a burial chamber for a pharaoh, instead of even acknowledging high tech has been used in the construction, the copper chisels, etc. Can you speak a little bit to that, and as to why you think this resistance is so severe? Why are we not seeing, as a general mainstream science a machine instead of a burial chamber. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yes, and I think it's a slow process. And of course, when I first wrote the book and it was published, the resistance was more severe than it is now. But as far as Egyptologists, I mean, they just dismiss the idea out of hand, and so don't even follow the chain of evidence. I think what it's going to take, though, is groups like you, specialists like you, and other friends that I have, those who are technical ability, to take it seriously and discuss it a little more openly, honestly, without getting into ancient aliens or any of the unprovable, fanciful stuff. I mean, this is fanciful to a lot of people, right? The truth is more sensational than all the fantasies, really. But as far as the resistance to it, yeah, there's a resistance. There's a resistance to all ideas, really. And in this particular field, I mean, you're going to get even in your own profession, you'll have resistance. It doesn't matter what.
Oh, lots and lots of it. Yes, the mainstream utterly ignores us if they ever even get the chance. Yes.
Right, and so essentially, to raise the profile, I think would require somebody certainly more qualified than me to elevate it. And I can only do so much. And really, from my perspective, I'm just tickled pink that I actually was able to get the book published, and then I'm talking to you guys now and lady.
Well, so I hear so many different perspectives of and different theories about the pyramids. What is the mainstream narrative nowadays? Because there's so many speculations about it. What do they say? What do the Egyptologists say?
I'm not saying anything differently than what they said 20 years ago.
Or 150 years ago.
Or 150 years. Yeah, exactly. And now the Egyptians themselves are a little more receptive to the idea because they see that it elevates their culture.
Right.
But the mainstream universities, particularly Western universities, seem to have a control over the official narrative in Egypt. So while you may have Egyptologists that secretly, consider these ideas, they're not allowed to pursue them.
Have there been attempts to Sorry, Heather, you go. Yeah.
No, it's okay because I was kind of maybe going in a different direction, but I was just. Go ahead.
Right. Well, the follow-up question for me was going to be, have there been attempts, to your knowledge, to recreate the design of the Grand Pyramid on a small scale and see, or parts of it, if you will?
Yes.
Maybe I wasn't going in a different direction, Ito. Like read my mind, and I was like, "Is there a reception? Like, if we're producing this kind of energy, what is the evidence for reception for the collection of this energy to put in action? Like, is that Dejeb columns, Baghdad batteries, things like that, Ankh? What is the indicator of the common use of this energy if this is a power plant?
Right.
People use the energy, right?
Right, and I think leading into that, the question was, has there been attempts to replicate any part of the theory? And there have been several aspects of it that I've proven out myself. I mean, particularly the creation of hydrogen through the northern and southern shaft of the Queen's Chamber. Then John Cadman has created a pulse generator modeled after the subterranean chamber. And so the concept is that the entire pyramid was caused to vibrate and resonate at a particular frequency, and its natural frequency, which actually is a harmonic of the Earth's natural frequency.
Right.
And so those two features have an explanation, a theoretical explanation, because after all, unless you go back and talk to the builders and the scientists who designed and built this amazing structure, we can only do our best to use what we know to see if we can actually replicate it. Now, there's also research that's being conducted on the concept of vibration coming from a subterranean chamber and interacting with a gas, and also with the design or the acoustic design of the rest of the system that is actually modeled after the Great Pyramid, though it doesn't look like the interior of the Great Pyramid. But they're coming up with some very surprising results. Now, for you guys, I think my colleague would be able to speak more authoritatively on that and more deeply. And so I would suggest that, that becoming more a higher level conversation between you and him at a future date.
What I begin to see is just immediately the idea of being some sort of resonance chamber, and you're creating hydrogen in the Queen's chamber. Obviously, hydrogen rises. It's going to change the acoustics of the entire Grand Gallery all the way to the top into the King's chamber, if that's really what it's doing. It can't go through the granite plugs at the bottom, which again might have been put there for tuning. Why else would you put two there, as if you had to make sure that the sound was correct? And then you would have another drainage pipe for all the excess heavier gases to go down to the lower levels.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt? Which granite plugs are you referring to?
Oh, I was just thinking of the ones that were found and bypassed in 860 when Al Mahmoud went through.
Oh, in the ascending passage.
Yes. See, because I know there's a little sort of thing that leads to a grotto, and then it goes down into. Of course, that looks impossible to traverse. I just picture a hole in the ground. I've never seen even a picture of it. But considering where it's located, they would put it at a point which seems to everything comes out at that corner at the very base of the Grand Gallery, as if that was, if they all caused the effect down there, they would just have to adjust a little bit to create the proper tuning again. Because obviously, if you had holes in different places, you're going to mess it up more.
Yeah, I think, in the Giza Power Plant, I described what I thought about the well shaft, they call it. That's the one at the bottom of the Grand Gallery. The official literature or the mainstream literature calls it an access tunnel that the builders and operators, or those who had charge of the pyramid, the guardians they call them, dug a tunnel from the bottom of the descending passage up to the Grand Gallery. They knew the internal design, so they knew where they were going. And but it's large enough for a person to pass through. Probably not me, but somebody else. But there's another bit of evidence that supports that view, and that is, the view that existed in the original design. And that is given by Petrie, Sir William Flinders Petrie, who noted that the masonry around that shaft, there's one block that is only like 5 inches thick, or it's very thin. And he speculated that it would have originally been much thicker than that, because the pyramid builders didn't build with small elements, and he thought that was a small opening at one time, and it had been penetrated to allow somebody to climb through it.
I see.
But it's a fascinating subject. But the three granite plugs, there are three granite plugs, not two, at the bottom of the ascending passage.
Oh yeah, there's two in a door or something, or was. Yes.
And I speculated that they were used to project interference sound waves in order to contain or control the energy level within the interior chambers.
So I got a question here. Is the new gap or the new huge chamber that they just recently discovered inside the Great Pyramid?
Yes.
I was wondering if there's any news on that or any of your theories on what that might be or what might be in there, because I think I've heard some people trying to get in there.
Well, yes. I mean, there's a lot of speculation about that. The theory that fits the Giza Power Plant is actually not my theory. It's Eric Wilson's theory. And he's a Rolls-Royce engineer who I've been working with. Quite a brilliant guy. And I think I'm going to reserve comment on it and allow him to share that information with you if he wants to. Because he brings, the credentials and authority to be convincing about it. I can just only refer to what he has to say. And he hasn't published on it yet, so.
Fair enough.
But it's a significant feature. It's an exciting feature. The first thing I wanted to do was go out and broadcast to the world, but, I'm a little more careful and introspective these days in my old age.
Well, there is certainly given the spiral, the inner spiral, that idea, I've seen that one. The extra room, as we were just talking about, that I think it was discovered with muons or something. And what's impressive is how far we've advanced just in this little bit of time, because for Al Mahmoud to get in there, the pyramid only had the entrance, and it went just down a shaft. They couldn't see the actual one leading up into the Grand Gallery, apparently. And I've heard very interesting things that the reason that it went straight to that particular juncture was not that it was trying to that they were digging into it. And accidentally found that, because they would have seen, since the casing stones were still on, they would have seen all the footprints of people who had climbed up, opened up that shaft, and gone in, because it was apparently on a hinge, and it was discussed, in ancient Greece times. So they discovered only the Grand Gallery in 860, and what might have been in there at that time, like anything that was left in there has been removed. And arguments say that that's why he built the tunnel, to get that stuff out, because he couldn't get it around that bend. So things like those resonators that you were talking about, too tall to get around that bend, he took them out. And they could be the tuning forks for all we know. We have no idea what they would look like, of course, but your electrode idea with you can see clearly that there was, perhaps, it was providing some sort of, like you said, a level sensor, and that if they're changing the gas inside to change frequency, perhaps. This is a highly engineered object.
Yes, I'm looking at the image on the screen. I would take out the grapnel hook, the greenstone ball, and cedar wood right now, because I don't know. Sometimes you have these incidental pieces of evidence, and you try to force them into a theory and make them work. And in retrospect, that wasn't a good idea of mine. The electrodes themselves function perfectly well as a fluid switch without any addition.
and of course, we learned that there's a space on the other side, and of course, because of this, we really don't know necessarily about many of the other pyramids. There could be, again, hidden rooms, because most of the stuff is this particular one, the Great Pyramid, is just beautiful, even in its damaged state. So, but I wonder if, because of it's at its peak of technology, because they had to do something drastic to keep this thing going, that just things like because they apparently. If it was just a well in the area that was doing this, doing the humming or whatever they were able to utilize, whatever was working for them. There's pyramids all around the world. Some of them are just earthen mounds covered with, slabs of rock or concrete. Perhaps maybe it is the separation of wet and a dry insulative layer. I'm just imagining as an electrical engineer. But you keep going through this. They clearly, this final disaster, whatever it was, stopped whatever this thing from functioning ever again. Perhaps all pyramids were losing power, so to speak, and these were just the newest ones, were the ones that were, let's try to keep it going, because they finally hit stride, and look at the machining that they were doing. As you had showed evidence of actual computerized mechanical drafting or machining where they were on the faces, and these bowls are nothing to sneer at either. They're impossible to make. How do you make that out of stone? Just
those items, that's a nice moment for me to jump in again. These items, these disc shapes, can you speak to those, whatever kind of function they might have had and how many were found, etc.?
World's most extensive cheese tray?
Yeah, those are a real teaser, aren't they? They found over 20,000 stone bowls in Saqqara and some of the crypts underneath the Joseph pyramid, the step pyramid.
20,000.
20,000 of them. They are highly precise. My son went to Egypt with me in March. I took a tour group to Egypt in March, and he came along, and there was a gentleman who had some Egyptian stone bowls. He didn't bring them with him because he wanted to, keep possession of them.
Of course.
So anyway, we arranged to do an inspection. My son arranged to do an inspection at the place that he works in Indianapolis. And essentially what it was just a very simple inspection to rotate the bowls and use an indicator that is commonly used in manufacturing companies by machinists, tool makers, inspectors. It essentially measures the displacement of a surface to a true geometric feature. So if it's a flat surface, it measures any displacement along that flat surface. If it's a round surface and you rotate the piece, then it measures the displacement on and tells you how round it is. Well, this bowl had 2 lugs on it, which is common for Egyptian bowls. It wasn't a very large one, probably about 6 inches high, maybe 4 inches in diameter, with 2 lugs, and then the traditional hole and flange on the top. Locating it on a rotary table and being able to turn the rotary table freely and using a interactive indicator. The difference between the different surfaces to being concentric and round was only 0.02 of an inch. And that was an interior diameter, the inside diameter of the bowl, the top surface of the bowl, and the outside diameter of the bowl, a point along the contour. Because the bowls are not just round on one axis, but when you look at it on the central, perpendicular to the central axis, then you're going to see it's a contour. So that was pretty impressive. And now, what they were used for in each individual case, I don't have a firm conclusion about that. I did speculate in the Giza Power Plant that perhaps they were using those as resonators. And when we go back in time and study what the ancients knew about acoustics, if you go to the Roman amphitheaters, they had mastered acoustics. The Greeks had mastered acoustics. And the amphitheaters contained these vessels in little cavities around the terraces, and they were used actually to amplify any sound that was being created. Quite amazing. So there is that. And a study of that, my other colleague, Robert Walter, could speak more at length on that. And so there is a possibility that they were using stone resonators, but that's just a speculation. Any material that would work, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, getting back to the stone bowls, the 20,000 stone bowls, were they configured in any particular pattern, or were they just randomly sitting around, or what?
I think they had all different kinds of shapes and patterns of stone bowls, but I've not seen the full collection. I've seen just small. I mean, a lot of the antiquities that you find in museums around the world were originally in these sites in Egypt, and then sold on the black market, or gifted by some people in authority, sold to a museum or something like that. So the full collection, and doing an inventory and measuring each one of them and determining their frequencies, how they resonate. That would be quite an undertaking. I don't have enough time in my lifetime to even think about it.
No, what I meant was when they were found on the site, were they arranged in a square or in a circle, or were they randomly sitting around, or does anybody know?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. Sorry.
Is anybody doing that research, finding out their frequencies, if you will?
Not to my knowledge.
Right. Totally ignored me. Okay.
Well, I'm curious, Neil, I'm curious why you think that these are really hard to replicate or to make. To me, it just looks like they're thrown pottery, like on a pottery wheel. I've seen some really nice pottery that has some good symmetry to it.
It's very hard stone. And diorite in some cases, igneous rock, and the level of craftsmanship is quite high, as you can see. It's not something that would be easily done today. It seems that we did it with clay.
Okay.
But this is we like to get right in there with a device, a tool, and to get right down to the bottom and to carve the inside of that out. It's not superhuman, but it would take a while, I'm thinking.
Well, I think our guest Chris can speak to this topic very well, about the impossibility, I would say, to make this by the human eye even this precise.
Well,
can we do it that precise with the human eye?
Generally speaking, if you are a really good craftsman and you have a good eye and you have fairly simple geometry, you can detect dimensions to within 10,000ths of an inch. But with a piece like that, I mean, it's already been pointed out that they are hard granite, diorite, schist, some of them, which is relatively easy to work comparatively. But but just the granite and the basalt, the diorite would be, you would need, you know, a good set of tools, diamond tools to grind them or machine them. The geometries do not lend support to the idea that, you know, they were created completely on a machine, on a lathe. It had to involve some other process with it. And I say that because the lugs, they have lugs on the OD, on the outside diameter, which would have to be the space between the lugs would have to be machined out, and then follow the same contour as the body of the bowl or the urn. And so there are, I mean, as far as manufacturing goes, they're fairly simple shapes. What makes them significant is that they were created thousands of years ago. And yeah, so definitely not handworked for sure.
So it sounds to me like you need, we would definitely nowadays need robotics and computers and that kind of machinery with good tools, high quality, in order to even reproduce them.
No, not to that level of sophistication. The bowls, they could be made just using a simple manual lathe. Without any robotics or computer attached to it.
Okay.
But you'd have to, you just have to be really careful when you're doing the part around the lugs. Yeah, as you could, maybe drill into the rock and then sort of bring the drill along and so on. It would be tedious, but you could probably do it. But the other one that you had shown, Chris, Mr. Dunn,
Chris is fine.
Chris is fine. Okay. The faces that were all exactly the same, and you showed that they were made with the same diameter tool. I thought that was just amazing. Like, and of course, it's there in front of you, but no one saw it. And as you point out, the human hand is not that precise to imitate that over and over again without ever making a mistake. You know, that's.
Are you talking about the Ramses faces?
I believe I am. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, those are amazing. When I started to study those, it just lit me up. I was like a bonfire working on that. And I think it's because of my experience and the practical experience I have that caused those to become a lot more significant to me. And with those, I have to say that I do think that they had CNC or some kind of multi-axis machines that were precisely controlled. And what these machines look like compared to ours, I have no idea, because they don't exist in the archaeological record.
Right.
Well, we haven't found them yet. But the characteristics of these statues are such that I have to conclude that they were machined. I mean, they have typical machinist mistakes on them, errors, work shifting on a machine, which causes certain undercuts and mistakes to be cut in the granite. So that's a fascinating subject. And, I have a few pages on my website the empty statues, the Dendera Temple, Abu Ruwash, which is an amazing site. So if we schedule another conversation, actually we could have two. We could just talk about the evidence for machining, if you so wish, and I could involve other experts on that. And then to continue the electric universe a kind of discussion on the Great Pyramid, then I could bring up other experts to talk to you.
Yes. Oh, that would be fantastic. All of that.
Yes, that would be awesome.
All of that.
Yeah, one topic we haven't even touched yet would be all the catastrophes and the evidence of a major event that would have destroyed a lot, for example. I think we could spend a whole episode on that one.
Yes, I mean, it's a multifaceted and very interesting subject, and I think it's important for humanity to follow those threads and discuss the philosophical implications, the implications for consciousness in terms of how we view ourselves, how we view ourselves as a part of the planet and the universe, and the mortality of civilizations. Those are all very interesting discussions to have.
Oh, but as regards machining, I thought I saw on the website the idea that there were big grinding wheels of the right diameter to match the curvature in the ball, and that they operated in these trenches.
Yes, that's on my website.
Okay, so
I saw that as well. Yes.
So that was really the answer to the machining question, isn't it?
It's a part of the answer. I mean, even the function of a saw. A saw is not the most sophisticated machine tool, and so when you have to look for the simplest solution, you're kind of driven towards the use of a saw. But then the questions are, how was it powered, and what materials was it made out of? But the evidence is clearly cut into the rock. It's undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I find that just looking at something that we would do so difficult. You go look at that. What was it? The giant stele? No, it's not called stele. The one in the Aswan quarry there.
The unfinished obelisk.
Obelisk, thank you. And and of course with those pits in it, and the way it looks like it was very simply dug, like just as if it was no problem. And of course, and we've noticed this several times. We see to work on a principle that today that we do things because that's the best or most efficient way of doing it. We don't necessarily go really hard into something unless we're trying to impress somebody with how much work we put in, or rich things. Oh yes, this is Corinthian hand stitched leather in this car. Oh yeah, it's beautiful. But you don't necessarily do that when you're trying to do something engineering wise to fulfill a function. And the things like these scoop marks, which we can't describe, or the evidence says we've seen with the possibility of perhaps maybe some sort of vitrification, but clearly we also see saw work. So we see things beyond just mechanical energy, and we see things that are engineered. With that, then it looks like this. It feels like that was that they were trying to build the apex of their technology, either to save themselves because maybe things are getting weaker now and they need to build even a better one, and that's why it was one of the best ones. But of course, it could just be, no, it's just the most powerful one of the same thing. Who knows? But we do see the disaster that befell several pyramids in the area, and casing stones blown off in all directions in concentric circles. I think there's a pyramid that they call a pyramid, but just looks like a pit in the ground, so not too far away. So
yeah, that's the one at Apple Wash, and there's a lot like that.